Greetings, Rob Hart here, and welcome to RHDS Music. This is part 2 of the interview with Anthony J Cirone. And if you haven't checked out part 1, please go back and check that out, as there's a lot of amazing stuff in there. In this interview, we break down playing concepts and interpretations of the famous, renowned book, Portraits in Rhythm. This playing demonstration was shot with Mr. Cirone in person at his residence. However, there was some issues with one of the cameras, and so I had to resort with using one angle that was focused on his hands. So please excuse the video. Please check out my website, robhartdrumstudio.com, and there you'll find in-depth courses that cover rhythm theory, technique, groove independence, and much more. If you enjoy the content on this channel, please like, subscribe, and comment, as will help this channel grow. Now sit back and enjoy part 2 with Maestro Anthony J Cirone.
Hi, my name is Anthony J Cirone. Everybody knows me as Tony, and I'm here to present a classical approach to snare drum playing, which is my whole background, from playing in middle school, grade schools. I studied with people that were in those businesses. I really didn't do a whole lot of drum set playing. I grew up in the early 70s playing in bands, then in orchestras. And we're going to take what I learned in the classical music, the way composers wrote for percussion, and then I would teach the students that are not necessarily classical drummers, but they were learning drumming, and I had to start with what they knew, which is rudimental drumming, and take those techniques and apply them to classical. So I'll show you the differences with all the little rudimental things that we all learned. So first of all, in the 70s when I grew up, everybody played like this. Nobody played like that except they played timpani. And so I still play like this. But a lot of my colleagues have switched also to this. This is very common. This is perfectly fine technique, but I never outgrew this. So it looks a little different, but it sounds the same. Now, what I want to give a title to this clinic, it would be Playing What's Not on the Page. In other words, interpreting what you're seeing there, interpreting the technique, the dynamics that are there, whatever accents, crescendo. That's about what we got. Crescendo, decrescendo, dynamic changes, of course, and even with that, we have to learn to interpret what this is. Now, let's look at my Portraits in Rhythm. You should all be familiar with that. Actually, that's only one of the rare white books. So they're all red. This is Portraits in Rhythm, Advanced Edition. Now, I did that after many years because although this is what I wrote in the 70s when I was writing this book, but it didn't really say all that I wanted to say. I didn't put it in there. And this one, we'll see, I'm going to do a few we're going to talk about. You're going to see a difference. But let's look at number 1. I'm sure you're all familiar with number 1 and number 1. Now this is what I actually wrote, and this is how I actually played. I put the little subtle things that I would do. Now, look at the first measure, first 2 measures. So, fortissimo, diminuendo to mezzo forte. Back to mezzo forte. But when I play it, I play this down to piano, then jump up to mezzo forte, more like this. And I had the accents, kept the accents, but I also phrased into the accent. I phrase up to the accent. And that was just natural playing. But then later I put that in because that's how I performed it whenever I demonstrating this. So classical music, and I'm acting like a conductor. If you've ever played in an orchestra, the conductor changes things. Trombone's too loud, Flute, more flute. That's not in the part. That's what the conductor is deciding that should be to make it complete. So I did take this whole book and wrote another book with all my dynamics in it and additions to how I actually played the music. So let me just show you here. Whenever I give this lecture, you'll see what the tempo marking is. It's allegro, assai. Now when I'm with an audience, I would say raise your hand if you know what assai means. And nobody would raise their hand. But that word, the composer put that word in there, it has meaning. It means something. And you should always look up these words. There's plenty of dictionaries around. Look up that word. Now you got to interpret it. Okay. It's in this. One of the interpretations of this word is much. So if this says fast much, if we use it in English, all right, that makes sense. Go a little faster than allegro, not just a slow allegro. And you have the quarter note equals 132, which is where I played it at. Now, when I play this, as I wrote it, it sounds like this. And that's mezzo forte. But when I performed it, I went down to piano here. And then up. It's just how I played it. And then I just put that in there. So you're giving a little more interpretation of what all these marks are. And we can go through the whole page and you'll see that. And what I'm doing, I'm adding slurs, right? They didn't do this for us in these years. No composer ever gave us a slur. And that slur means exactly what it means if it's for any other instrument. So I changed it by going down to piano and then up to mezzo forte. It's very similar. It's not a whole lot of change, but it's more interesting. And I'd give a crescendo into the accent. So I'm adding character to it. These marks are for character. The more Italian you put in there, the more you have to translate what it means to you as a performer when you're playing the piece. And this is important. When you have a phrase, you go, not just, that's mezzo forte. Then subito, pianissimo. You move more to the edge. I put in here a dashed diminuendo. When I use a dashed diminuendo, it's not as severe as a regular diminuendo. This goes all the way down to nothing. And then I go back, mezzo forte. This now, I go down to piano. And then I jump to mezzo forte. So those are the kind of things that you add, and I do these little dashed crescendos instead of just little character. And I would do that, I'd interpret that, whatever part the composer wrote, I would try to get the character in his head, and I try to add that to the music. Now, I'll explain more detail as we go through this book. This book has a lot of not much, but with all these phrases, gives you, it's like almost a different piece. You're exaggerating parts of this as a slur. See, yada-dum-bum, yada-dum. Yes, you're interpreting that. That's your feeling of what this should sound like. And that's what conductors do. They take this and they give you this. And they tell the orchestra how to do that. Make a slur. Now, this is very common to wind and strings. They see this all the time. We get nothing. So it's for us, too. We just have to learn how to use it. So one other thing here is the written accents and the dashed crescendo and decrescendo. We want to make that an important part of the piece, so it's not just simply loud to soft. It's the shape. It's crescendo, decrescendo to piano, mezzo forte subito in the next measure. That's playing what's not on the page. Now, this says go down to whatever you want. Actually, it says to go down to mezzo forte. But when you interpret this, you could make this go down as far as you want. Written to mezzo forte would be something like that. And that's an interpretation too. We can do interpretations. You have to be careful you don't change something to a degree that it's no longer the composer's. But when we're playing solos especially, we want to add part of what we think is important, how it's shaped. And especially this kind of a shape. You wouldn't want to play this. I would never play it that way. But I like that larger two-measure shape. So you learn to do this by listening to what the orchestras were doing. I would hear I see the trumpets are doing that, so I would follow them, and I would do the same thing, matching their dynamics. They just weren't that careful about giving us a lot of this kind of shapes. They just let us go. All right? With something like this, it's a subito piano, but I have these little crescendos there. I would give a character slur to each one of those, a little crescendo into the accent. That's me. And he said a sigh. I have to make up my mind what I think he might have meant, and that's how I do it. Now, all right.
So I would like to ask you about the dynamics. Quadruple P, is that in orchestras where they actually have that written?
Oh, yes.
They do.
Quadruple P, 4-piece?
You have 4P. I've seen that in quadruple Fs.
Yeah.
Is that common?
Well, that's not common. We see that. And we have to be careful when we do that. Now, I don't have anything louder than a fortissimo, and you don't want to make it out of character. I wouldn't want to play 4 Fs necessarily because I wrote 2. Use your judgment. See what you hear. See what they're doing, and manage the orchestra sound.
And number 2 is the 3/8. Eighth note equals 144.
Yeah.
Now, for me, as a kid, growing up doing these pieces, the tempos were quite challenging. I sometimes could not get there. I'll be honest with you, because I would fall apart. So I would go slower.
Sure, and you can't go at a speed you can't handle.
Right.
And that's interpreting it also. Maybe that in a year you might do it faster. That's all fine. These are solos, and usually the audience doesn't have this in front of them while you're playing. They want to hear the piece as it's written. And they accept what you do as part of the piece. That's your interpretation. And that's very common. We do that all the time. So this one now, same approach. If we can see here, I have phrases over all of that I want phrased. It's the whole piece. I use phrasing in all my music. Just to play this, like this. kind of boring. It's not much there. But if I take this same part and I add my crescendo, little crescendos to each one, decrescendo. See, this challenges me to phrase that automatically. Now, pianissimo, big difference. That you always want to make the big differences. Forte piano, just make sure these are not the same as the one forte. The crescendo is written in. Sforzando piano. I say because it's now going to make a diminuendo, so I add to that. Give the roll a little attack. A dot over a short roll like that, to me, means not a crush roll necessarily. It depends on how it's going. Here we have eighth notes, 16th notes, but they're basically can be played with a crush roll. It's only mezzo forte. That tells you pretty much what to do. Use your judgment, but be musical. Try to make sure something in there is not in the part. You're adding to the part. You, as the soloist here, are also the conductor. If you were going to conduct an orchestra doing that, you would tell people when to phrase. And that's what you want to do with snare drum. You don't want to just let it be dry, loud, soft. You want to add all the interesting. Yeah, I phrased it in 3. Big crescendo to your roll. Now this, I did it with a little phrasing. So I gave it the shape of a 3 in the beat. From here. You can always hear where the next phrase starts. Forte piano. It goes down to pianist or piano. Character to all the rolls. Crush rolls. Same dynamic. So, a drag in classical music is this, not this. If a composer doesn't understand what this is for rudimental music, he may have you just play it open. That would be your interpretation. But for music that you play, whenever you see this, the French composers use this a lot, it's a closed drag. Accents written on the top. And that's pretty traditional. Now, the other one I want to show you.
Number 3.
Yeah,
which you were talking about the grace notes played as 5-stroke rolls, but played as buzz. I always thought they were open. My interpretation was they were singles.
Yeah,
because we didn't know.
That's right.
So whenever I saw those, I thought they had to be singles, 3-stroke rough, 4-stroke rough, and then you had 5 and 6, I think. But you're saying they're buzz rolls, 5-stroke buzz rolls.
5-stroke closed roll. One. And that's what I wanted, the sound I wanted. Closed roll, forte piano, crescendo. Well, there's more than this. Is why I say play what's not on the page. Gives you an opportunity to do things like this. Now, if you've come from a background of rudimental drumming, you may want to play that more open. So let's see from here. Forte piano. You have an option to play it open or closed.
Okay.
This, I never would play.
It's hard.
It's hard. It's
hard,
a little out of character.
I'll tell you, at Berkeley we did this piece.
Yeah.
His name was Ed Kaspick at Berkeley College of Music.
Yeah.
And he had me do like what we call the quintuplets, septuplets as the roll to get a crescendo.
Yeah.
As we got faster, I think less notes.
Okay.
But he didn't know. He didn't know either.
Yeah.
So he told me to play him as single strokes.
His interpretation
Right.
of that. Now, I don't know. I know who wrote this book, and I know what he meant, but we don't know that composers understand this very much more than conductors do. And so there is some freedom when you're interpreting this, and we understand that. And a conductor may or may not understand that, but he may ask you to play it as singles. That's his interpretation. And that we still honor that today as that is a character that we use for rudimental drumming. And the character is to play them closed for classical music. And that's how I mostly interpreted those 7-stroke rolls. Right?
So is it triplet?
Well, that's just single strokes. But it's kind of fast.
It's fast and it's not. It's
the character.
Clumsy, right?
Yeah.
The roll would be easier to do it as a 7-stroke.
Yeah, a 7. If it's slower, you take a moderato, maestoso, a little slower that you can do this piece of slower tempo. That would be fine. And that would be a closed roll. Probably not so much like that. But that's interpretation. I'm not right or wrong. I don't know. Other composers may want that open. Others may want it closed. If the conductor accepts it, then you're fine. Not that you go have a meeting with them in the intermission. All right, so now, but here, look what we have here. What are those dashes over those notes? I said moderato maestoso. Well, there's the Italian word, moderate tempo. What character do you think maestoso has? What is it? Does it give you a feeling of anything? Maestoso?
Or dramatic or broad?
Yes, broad is a good word. And this is in for any instrument. So you wouldn't play this forte. That would not be maestoso. I would slow it down. Every note gets important. That's what I would do.
So when you see, sometimes I do musicals,
Mm-hmm.
and they say broad.
Yeah.
Broadly.
Yeah. Slow it down a little and give it some emphasis.
So
yes.
It's more, each note is more pronounced.
Yes.
Bigger.
And that's for trumpet and clarinet and flute, they all will do that. And you would imitate that. But this is fairly common in music. Not so fairly common that we put every note like that. Yeah, you could make that fortissimo and you'd get a similar effect. But for music, it's not just the ba, how you hit the initial stroke. It's ba. Now we can't do that unless we make a roll, you know. But you wouldn't do that in this case. Let's see. No, I can't do it with a roll. That's got to be a stroke. That's the maestoso part. And that's character, adding character to that. It's definitely different than you definitely got to give each note that a little bit of an attack. That's what you have to hear. As soon as you have the slur, now you're phrasing quarter notes here. See, I'm making that phrase. And this doesn't have it. This has the dashes. To an accent. Okay, so the idea here is use your judgment, try to make it musical, listen to the orchestra part, see what they do, what they exaggerate, what they may even can add a roll places where they don't, but that isn't here necessarily. Now, what does GP mean?
The grand pause.
What does that mean?
Wait, stop.
No.
No?
Not,
And there was something we called railroad tracks. Which
yeah, that's stop.
That's stop.
That's stop.
Grand pause, I thought, was a stop. Conductor cut you off, and then they come back with a downbeat.
It could be that. That could be one interpretation of that. Yeah. That's why, you have to listen to what's going on with the rest of the orchestra to know exactly what you should do. Let's see now here. These are the 5-stroke rolls again, right? One, and actually here it's forte. Crescendo. That's pretty common when you have these to close them up. And it sounds good. Let's see. Nice for snare drum. It's a nice character to it. Here you could try to keep the same character, but this is 3 and 4 and then 1. There's no dynamic change, so you keep it nice and even. So, use your judgment, listen to what the orchestra does, and try to get some of that character when the composer just doesn't give you anything. See what you can just add. GP means everybody stops. Nobody plays. Now, sometimes the conductor will, something like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and just stop conducting. They don't necessarily will just beat an empty measure like that. So you got to be careful. Let's see, what else? So GP is basically a measure because the conductor will also do this. 1, diminuendo, stop, and then go. Well, you're still here. You have to know nobody plays there. So he may stop 1, 2, 3, 4, and then, pow, you're back to tempo. And not every conductor will do the same thing. He can interpret it. All right? Morendo, another word. Got that one?
I'd have to look it up.
Yeah. You should always look up these words. Morendo translates to dying away. So you have to have some kind of a retard here, right? So 1. No, morendo, and slower. And then you stop for that measure. Every conductor would do that a little differently. Okay.
So the other question I had is that we grew up playing with a metronome.
Oh, yeah.
So in the early days with Scott Morris, we had a Franz metronome. It was a mechanical metronome.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not very accurate, but had a light on the top. Mm-hmm. But he always made me play with the metronome.
Well, that's fine. It's not. This is more giving you an idea.
Okay.
There's no. They do give you the tempo marking here if you want to know exactly what he said, but yeah, conductors have his liberties, and some take more than others. Now here, what's that? What do you call that?
That's the triple rough.
I never heard it called that.
So that's what I call it.
See?
3 graves, so it's in a main note, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, you could go with one hand, right?
Oh.
You could do that.
Oh, so you...
No, I don't do it that.
Oh,
That's
I've
not,
never seen that.
No.
Triple strokes.
This is a
main note. And a primary stroke.
4-stroke rough.
That's how I play.
That's what that is to us.
That's how I've always played it.
In classical music, yeah. You don't open it up. I mean, this is grandioso. See what the organ, they may go, that's grandioso. I'm playing general attitude. 1, 2, 3. So, and again, it's interpretive. Some may want with the crescendo in it, though. It's more separated. You could do that. So again, the player in a solo piece, this is your moment to make an interpretation of that. Andante grandioso. Don't just play, that's not too grand. Open, big crescendo. That would be appropriate for that. The grandioso affects that. And your fortissimo, the roll, that's the same kind of a roll, all full rolls. And this is marked in the part. Pretty standard. I mean, it's there, written out what you should do. What do you call this?
I call that a rough. Right. That's what I would interpret that as a rough.
Oh, it's a rough.
I do both the closed and the open. So.
Yes. Well, all right, you could do it closed or open. For me, it's closed. I play it closed. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that open, but it's a character. That's more exactly what that should be. But you wouldn't go, I wouldn't ever play it that way. That's very open. But again, these are all up for the conductor and the player. They may have a different idea how to do that. It's a rudimental, comes from the rudimental approach, and that's the same thing. Forte, dynamic, closed, something like that. Yeah. Now here we come to 4-stroke rough again. Diminuendo. That's a 4-stroke triple piano. It's open strokes, not closed. Yeah, that's one that's more discussed and played many different ways. I don't know if there's any right way. We have to interpret it. Rudimental would all be open. But when we take rudimental and put it to classical, this could challenge it. That's andante grandioso, not too fast. Grandioso, it's loud, nice big strokes open. Let this give it some character.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you've gotten a lot out of it and you've learned something. Until next time, keep practicing.